Hi, everyone. Good evening. Can everyone hear me okay? Mic's okay? Awesome. That's a very powerful mic. I don't have to click. All right. The Gilded Age, A Tale of Today, by Mark Twain and Charles Dudley Warner, is a satirical novel connecting greed, corruption, and social issues of the post-Civil War era United States. It follows the lives of the Hawkins family as well as Philip Sterling as they work toward financial success. Both primary family stories involve the questionable use of natural resources, specifically looking at mining and land speculation. The Hawkins family, led by Silas Hawkins and aided by Colonel Beriah Sellers, a charismatic con artist, spend the novel overvaluing a piece of land in the knobs of East Tennessee in the hopes of commercializing its imagined variety of mineral and other resources. Sellers, a hapless and penniless optimist and one of Twain's most popular characters, has a history of varied schemes, such as mule trading. In that case, Sellers sold his once successful enterprise in hopes of acquiring something more lucrative. But eventually he leaves his family in even greater financial distress. Quote, "As it was, he managed to kill two birds with one stone. That is to say, he killed the sugar speculation by holding for high rates till he had to sell at the bottom figure, and the calamity killed the mule that laid the golden egg," which is but a figurative expression and will be so understood. The joke here involves the play on mules and the geese that lay the golden eggs, as well as the ongoing theme of the gold and gilt play from the novel's title. Even following such a failure as this, though, the Sellers and Hawkinses remain eager to attempt other schemes. Laura and Washington Hawkins, along with Sellers, bring their speculative attitudes with them to Washington, D.C., becoming embroiled in political machinations and corruption as they work to turn that same Tennessee land into a university for African Americans. Meanwhile, Philip Sterling almost destroys himself searching for coal in a Pennsylvania mine, seeking wealth in a manner that costs his friends and sponsors, the Bolton family, their country home that was once replete with rare trees and flowers, as well as garden and lawn conservatories. Though Philip is the novel's success story, his triumph comes at a cost. The Boltons lose almost everything in their support of him, and while he does win both finding coal and he wins their daughter Rose as to be his wife at the end, she sacrifices her dreams of a medical career in order to become a mere wife. In both cases, Twain and Warner, and for those of you that aren't familiar with the novel, Twain, the Sellers and Hawkins is kind of the Twain part, and Philip Sterling and the Boltons is kind of the Warner part, but they both read each other's. In both cases, Twain and Warner shine a light on the kind of greed associated with speculation and mining that runs throughout the novel, as characters are driven towards what they term that beautiful demon of money. The title of The Gilded Age is itself a metaphor, suggesting a glittering surface ultimately hiding the true substance of what may be the rot of corruption. Now, this is an image of the PBS special on the era The Gilded Age, named after the book The Gilded Age. It's a novel firmly rooted in the world of the senses. According to Justin Kaplan, the novel, quote, echoes the sounds of its times, the rustle of greenbacks and the hiss of steam, pigs grunting in the village mud, the clang of railroad iron and the boom of blasting charges, the quiet talk of men in committee rooms and bankers' offices. Its raw materials are disaster, poverty, blighted hopes, bribery, hypocrisy, seduction, betrayal, blackmail, murder, and mob violence. Kaplan adds, its subject is democracy gone off the tracks. In terms of blasting charges, raw materials such as coal are one of the foregrounded subjects of the twinned family plots of the novel. Patricia Yeager notes that even in 2011, the time of her writing, the age of coal is not close to being over. The Gilded Age contrasts the idealism of a speculative vision of the American dream with the harsh realities of capitalism and political corruption, emphasizing the disparities between the rich and poor, the exploitation of the working class, and the moral compromises people make in the pursuit of wealth. The novel compares these compromises in terms of their treatment of the beyond human world as well. Together, Twain and Warner are effective at ironically describing and criticizing the misuse of land witnessed during their time, specifically through mining, predicting the significance of coal, a significance that has lasted into modern times, in much the same way that they predicted the era now referred to as the Gilded Age. Mark Twain has been connected to the most controversial issues of his time and beyond, such as racism, women's rights, imperialism, animal welfare, and the environment. His writing partner, Charles Dudley Warner, is known best for his editorial work, as well as his nonfiction texts, such as My Summer in a Garden in 1870, a memoir Being a Boy, 1877, and his travel narrative In the Wilderness, 1878. According to Nathan Wolfe, keynote speaker coming up this weekend, and others, Warner made a famous proclamation that is often attributed to Twain. Quote, "The weather in New England is a matter about which a great deal is said and very little done." Both consider the beyond human world in their book, in their various works. Their lyricism about nature appears, for example, in the river scene at the beginning of the Gilded Age. When the sun went down, it turned all the broad river to a national banner laid in gleaming bars of gold and purple and crimson. And in time, these glories faded out in the twilight and left the fairy archipelagos reflecting their foliage in the steely mirror of the stream. While the novel is mostly about fake gold or gilt, and the lengths speculators will go to achieve quick wealth, some elements of the country they're describing remain lovely. Twain's beloved Mississippi River is here a canvas, a national banner, for a sunset of genuine gold. Moreover, the river makes a partial reference to key themes in the novel as well. Its steely mirror is a play on the sterling silvery tones that are going to be associated with Philip Sterling throughout. In his biography on Twain, Ron Powers observes in particular Twain's aptitude for the necessary literary work of capturing the physical world, terrain, weather, architecture, with words. Continuing that Twain's greatest accomplishments in the area are seldom remarked upon, even though they can be witnessed, quote, from the Mississippi River as national banner in the Gilded Age, through the Acropolis by night in Innocents Abroad, through the Rockies described as sultans of fastness in Roughing It, to the interior of a cave in Tom Sawyer. Instead of this focus, though, Twain seems to be remembered more generally in terms of his satiric voice and aphorisms, both of which do remain on display in the novel that he co-writes with Warner. While the Gilded Age provides a sublime moment of natural beauty in an early Twain-penned section, its focus is more generally on the East Coast, on man-made speculative ventures and the strive for quick wealth in both the Twain and Warner-focused chapters. These scenes continue to provide opportunities to engage with the natural world, this time describing an extractive manner. In an editor's column article for a 2011 issue of PMLA, writers were tasked with theorizing literature as how it was divided into its energy processed and produced, as opposed to more familiar groupings of texts in terms of periodization or nations. It was a kind of a thought experiment. This work is interesting in terms of eco-criticism as, quote, thinking about literature through the lens of energy, especially the fuel basis of economies, means getting serious about modes of production as a force field for culture, according to Jaeger. The kinds of energy used to produce material wealth and products are connected to culture. Culture and energy become parts of the same conversation. In this manner, the Gilded Age is largely a coal-focused text. Twain and Warner spotlight the labor and energy involved in the mining of coal before the easy surplus of energy that occurs with the discovery of petroleum and oil. Michael Zeiser brings the discussion of coal or energy to U.S. literature specifically, quote, the mining of coal, which must be brought by brute force from seams buried far below the ground, epitomizes the 0 degree of labor that so fascinated many 19th century intellectuals and underscores the ultimate dependence of even an advanced industrial society on the input of human energy. In the Gilded Age, a great deal of attention is paid to the work Philip Sterling does in attempting to discover this vein of coal, leading up to his eventual success. He's able to pay a labor force to assist him at first, but eventually it is down to himself mining alone and desperately, about to give up before hitting the mother lode. Twain and Warner do focus on that brute force of human energy involved in mining, something Twain would have an intimate understanding of as he had his own experience as an unsuccessful silver miner in his Nevada days. Throughout the Gilded Age, characters are seduced by easy wealth in a manner that ends up harming them and even losing them the mule that lays golden eggs, as explained above. Gold and the superficial appearance of it are key themes throughout the novel. The Gilt is covering, in this case, coal, not the black gold of oil that would come later in the nation's history, but rather the earlier version of that energy's form of wealth. However, Twain and Warner complicate a simple eco-critical reading by rewarding the characters with success after his efforts. Philip Sterling does find coal, and he is rewarded for that. coal is also therefore sterling. Throughout, readers see winners and losers in their various schemes that are as they try to achieve great wealth, specifically through coal, but also in a coal or other extractive opportunities, flavored speculative gamble on the Tennessee lands. Analyzing the concept of speculation, Da Zheng notes that the word was first mentioned by Samuel Johnson, the British dictionaryist, if that's a word, in the 1700s as an examination by the eye, as well as a train of thoughts formed by meditation. It has developed its now familiar meaning in the 1830s, following the English author Samuel Maunder, who redefined it as the practice of buying articles of merchandise or any purchasable commodity whatever in expectation of a rise of price and of selling the same at a considerable advance. So what we now know of as speculation. Characters seek enormous fortunes based on the potential of extractive wealth in privately owned lands. In the novel, Sterling is considered a more noble character than the Hawkinses and Sellers. After his success at finding coal, he transfers the title to his mind to the Boltons, his sponsors that had been supporting him throughout. Zheng continues, Philip's fever of speculation is cured by the Jeffersonian bucolic life. Sterling returns to the land in a small agricultural way. In some ways, then, Twain and Warner can be seen as critiquing capitalism itself, or at least the form of capitalism that seduces people with the kind of easy wealth that is not sustainable or realistic in either the eco-critical or financial sense. They see this nation as moving towards speculation and extractive industries, away from either a Jeffersonian agrarianism that concludes Sterling's narrative, or that Mississippi River lyricism described in an earlier Hawkins chapter. All right. First section, the Gilded Tennessee Land, the Twain section. In the Gilded Age, Cy Hawkins, the Hawkins patriarch, enumerates the potential wealth within the Tennessee land even as he is talking his family into moving to Missouri, referring to the land being left behind as a gold mine that will ultimately be worth as much as $1,000 an acre. Italics are Twain's. While Hawkins takes his family from poverty to poverty across the state line, he believes all the while that he is leaving them financially better off due to his investment in this land. Hawkins describes the future wealth in coal, iron, and copper, along with lumber and agricultural interests, that he believes all might exist within this Tennessee land, and he imagines steamboats and the railroad as future markets for that coal. During this period, both markets are becoming more reliant on coal than wood to fuel their engines. Well, do you know, Silas asks, they've quit burning wood in some places in the eastern states, and what do you suppose they burn? Coal. This misplaced confidence in the prospective wealth inherent in the Tennessee land becomes one of the driving plots of the novel. Allison Enser observes that Mark Twain liked to write about himself, and any fans of Mark Twain kind of know that. In The Gilded Age, this trait is presented in his description of the Hawkins family and their deep, if ultimately doomed, connection to the land in Tennessee. The Clemens family, including John Clemens, Mark Twain's father, I'm going to just call Sam Clemens Mark Twain throughout, but so his father's name is Clemens. Mark Twain's father moved to Missouri from Jamestown, Tennessee, where the family owned over 75,000 acres of land. Similarly, the Hawkins family moved from Obedstown, Tennessee to Missouri, leaving behind the same acreage of land. In both cases, the families continued to own land they could not live on, but considered to be ideal for speculative endeavors. When both fathers, real and fiction, died, they reminded their families to hold on to that land, that it would make their fortunes one day. That day, however, never materialized in either real or fictional version. Twain would go on in his autobiography to lament the land that hung over his family in this way, promising future wealth but providing nothing material. Indeed, both the Clemens and Hawkins families failed to sell the land at a variety of opportunities throughout their lives, believing it always worth slightly more than whatever offered price, and then only to lament that failure to sell shortly thereafter. Twain writes, "It is good to begin life poor. It is good to begin life rich. These are wholesome. But to begin it prospectively rich, the man who has not experienced it cannot imagine the curse of it." Interestingly, Twain emphasizes the word prospectively here, which also references mining and the concept of striking it rich, the prospect. Twain recognizes the curse of such potential and yet never realized wealth, but that doesn't mean he was able to resist it, as his famous page typesetter investment history demonstrates. Twain was, in fact, believe it or not, the one member of his family who was able to realize wealth from the Tennessee land, if symbolically. If any penny of cash ever came out of my father's wise investment but that, I have no recollection of it. No, I am overlooking a detail. It furnished me a field for cellars and a book. Out of my half of the book, I got $15,000 or $20,000. Out of the play, I got $75,000 or $80,000. Just about $1 an acre. The Gilded Age, thank you. The Gilded Age was his successful way to mine the Tennessee land, as writing, in addition to his going on the lecture circuit, had and would always be his guaranteed way for Twain to make money throughout his life. Early on, Cy tells his wife Nancy, "Well, you may open your eyes and stare, but it's so. You and I may not see the day, but they'll see it. Mind you, I tell you, they'll see it." The draw of wealth in this case isn't even for Cy himself. The speculative venture isn't even for himself. He knows throughout that he won't become wealthy through this speculation. It's not a quick wealth scheme. However, he remains confident that it's still a worthy scheme. The wealth will come for his family, and that therefore he is a good provider. He has secured his family's future, if not their present. His seemingly blind faith in speculation is not difficult to imagine at a time of dramatic change and technological advancement brought about through the Industrial Revolution and the invention of such technological advances as the steam engine and other things occurring during this era. Indeed, Hawkins remains dedicated to the Tennessee land and its wealth prospects until his death. When he dies in the novel, in a not very different way than Twain has described his own father's death in his autobiography, he tells his gathered family, "I am leaving you in cruel poverty. I have been so foolish, so short-sighted, but courage. A better day is coming. Never lose sight of the Tennessee land. Be wary. There is wealth stored up for you there, wealth that is boundless. The children shall hold up their heads with the best in the land yet." Hawkins dies a failure. His family is left in deeper poverty than they had begun. To some extent, he realizes this. Bless you. However, he does not end with that regret. The land fever returns too quickly for true remorse. He almost immediately returns to his excitement about the various mining riches to be realized in the land that has now reached a mythical status for the entire Hawkins clan, extolling them not to lose sight of the land as he never has. Twain and Warner even give Cy's final words to the land, rather than to a specific loved one or his family in general. He fades away, whispering, "Gone? No, I see you, still. It is over. But you are safe, safe, the 10. Ironically, one of the repeated words in this dying speech is the word safe, something Cy has definitely not left his family. They are not wealthy or even secure. They're financially precarious at this point. Yet he dies trusting them safe because of his overabundance of belief in the speculative wealth of the land in Tennessee. This anticipatory wealth is Hawkins's real legacy to his family. His children, Washington and his adopted daughter Laura, will eventually turn to Washington, D.C. to find another way to monetize the land, and eventually failing at that as well. Laura Hawkins, the adopted daughter of the Hawkins clan, becomes a successful but fraudulent lobbyist in Washington, D.C. There, she dedicates herself to unloading her family's land for as much money as possible. Over the course of the novel, it becomes a supposed site of Knobs University, a historically black college and university, or HBCU. Laura is described by an impressed Washington, D.C. society at the height of her power as sacrificing of her landed estates to the uplifting of the downtrodden Negro, quote, through this university project. However, due to the corruption inherent in government, we all can imagine Twain's descriptions of Congress and stuff, they are coming out of this, the supposed benefactors receive nothing. The money for the university is siphoned off as bribes, and the actual purpose of it is lost. Not only is the land worthless in terms of mineral wealth, but in the end, it does nothing to help those most in need or promised something from the land. Eventually, even the newspapers become aware of this corruption, and by the end of the novel, are running articles about the great Negro University swindle. The Hawkins family had referred to their land as a gold mine previously, but truly it is a gilded one, or more accurately, a green one. The land has value only as itself. Financially, it is useless. The land is unsuccessful in becoming anything other than itself, as opposed to the corruption and duplicity rampant in Washington, D.C., where everything is actually something else. Twain and Warner use the more than human world to counterbalance the corrupt and dishonest society depicted throughout the novel. Laura's scheming brings her success at first, and then destruction. She dies ruined and alone, realizing that her life, was lined with the gilded and pillared splendors of her ambition, all crumbled to ruin and ivy grown. Every milestone marked a disaster. There was no green spot remaining anywhere in memory of a hope that had found its fruition. The unresponsive earth had uttered no voice of flowers in testimony that one who was blessed had gone that road. Twain and Warner make explicit the contrast between the gilded surface of her machinations and the ultimately unresponsive world prevalent throughout the novel. Interestingly, in this desolation, there is both a lack of green, as in goodness, as well as the seeming overabundance of green, as in the ivy that has overgrown the ruins of her life. Laura has failed in terms of material wealth, as well as any true connection to the land. The authors apply metaphors of the natural world here, as seen in the flowers described, to Laura's efforts to sell the Tennessee land. However, the flowers in this scene also remind the readers of the Boltons' home garden, where Philip Sterling and the Boltons had been happy, and which were lost through Sterling's own speculative efforts. The gardens in both of these cases are the representation of true success, rather than the material wealth that is being chased instead. As Warner and Twain play with terms like gilded and gold throughout the novel, they also have fun with names of main characters. The Hawkins family, as well as Colonel Sellers, are coded with the ideal of selling, of hawking, calling out loudly in the street to sell items. A homonym of hawk, H-A-W-K, is hawk, H-O-C-K, or to be in debt or having to sell your items. Without real wealth, only this all-consuming potential wealth based on speculation, based on selling, is maintaining the family, which has been reduced to hawking its wares. Twain and Warner present a society where the natural world is threatened by the greed and corruption of industrialists, politicians, and common individuals hoping for some quick money. Moreover, they show that this same society continues to marginalize and oppress minority communities. Rather than a progressive era novel, they write a satire of their time that continues to resonate today when many of these same concerns remain. This is significant because human lives are ruined at the same time that the beyond human world is mined, and promised improvements never occur. The issue of environmental justice connects eco-criticism with racism, classism, and imperialism, themes that are far more commonly discussed in Twain and to some extent in Warner. When Twain comes to be appalled by what he observes when traveling in the global south of British imperialism, as he describes in Following the Equator in 1896 or 7, he develops a sense of what would become known as environmental justice. Critics like Shelley Fisher Fishkin have gone so far as to argue that Twain was one of America's first critical race theorists. Moreover, in earlier works like The Gilded Age, eco-criticism can be added to this. The more than human world is damaged, sometimes even destroyed, due to extractive industries. In Twain's trademark ambiguous style, the failure to commodify the land in Tennessee can be seen, therefore, as a victory for the beyond human world. The novel concludes without extractive industries entering that Tennessee land, which is therefore allowed to remain green and not a site of post-mining ruin, such as what Philip Sterling would leave behind him in Pennsylvania. Twain is a man, after all, famous for books involving caves, rivers, and snowbound experiences in mountains. John Bird studies the conflicted metaphors of nature in Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn as part of a 2019 Mark Twain annual special issue on Mark Twain and nature. In it, Bird examines, quote, the metaphorical nature of Mark Twain's nature writing, looking at the ways his works function as stored energy, as energy pathways, and as both fossil fuel and renewable resources. Bird focuses on Twain's Mississippi River writings in his essay, rather than on the Gilded Age, even though a key scene in the Gilded Age occurs on the river, and mineral wealth is one of the driving forces of the novel. But I would say his argument can be applied to the Gilded Age as well. And in this case, the land is safe at the end, left to its own devices, without the speculation and quick riches occurring elsewhere around the country at this time, in regions like the Nevada of Twain's past, or the Pennsylvania and New York of both authors' present. A primary theme in the Gilded Age is the impact of mining on the natural environment, seen especially in the example of coal. Twain and Warner depict a society in which the rapid expansion of industry and the growth of cities has begun that would lead to significant environmental problems. I have moved on to Sterling section, which is named Sterling Coal, by the way. Industrialization was transforming the U.S. landscape, and many of the industries involved were turning to coal for their energy. While some Americans were concerned about the impact of these changes on the natural environment, most were just looking for opportunities to capitalize on mineral resources. Philip Sterling follows this trend of opportunism as he searches for coal in Pennsylvania. Twain and Warner play on the mining and speculation theme of the novel with Philip's surname. Sterling is a word connected to silver, to British money more generally, and to quality in terms of mineral as well as morality, according to various dictionary sources like Merriam-Webster or the OED. It is hardly a coincidence that the pair choose to name one of their main characters after the mineral that Twain attempted to mine in Nevada. Moreover, sterling is the opposite of gilded. Sterling silver is high-quality silver, while gilt is a fake layer put over lesser quality material for appearance's sake. A more traditionally heroic and significantly less fun character than Colonel Sellers or the Hawkins family, Sterling nevertheless comes close to harming everyone he cares about in his drive for wealth through mining. Philip Sterling is considered one of Warner's focal characters. Warner brought his own attitudes toward the beyond human world to his work on the novel. Moreover, after the Gilded Age, Warner would go on to write further about the beyond human world in a narrative in the wilderness, depicting his experiences traveling in the Adirondacks. Mining appears in that work as well, in this case in the aftermath of the process of mining, of what is left behind after an area has been denuded of its mineral wealth. The most melancholy spot in the Adirondacks is not a tamarack swamp, he writes. It is the village of the Adirondack Iron Works, where the streets of gaunt houses are falling to pieces tenantless. The factory wheels have stopped, the furnaces are in ruins, the iron and wooden machinery is strewn about in helpless detachment, and heaps of charcoal, ore, and slag proclaim an arrested industry. Iron mining was a significant part of the economy of New York State in the first half of the 19th century, having begun in the Adirondack region in 1775. I probably don't have to tell you all. Warner chose terms like melancholy, gaunt, and helpless to describe the town left abandoned once the iron had been fully extracted from that area. Towns associated with mining and its connected industries, like an iron works, are not sustainable. There is nothing else for the town to survive on following the removal of the ore from the region. They become ghost towns, leaving scars on the landscape. Warner's description of this unsustainability in the town would resonate with Twain's experience in his version in Nevada mining towns, and this is the kind of experience being drawn on in both of their descriptions of Philip Sterling in the Gilded Age. In addition, Twain contributes to the Sterling section through his own history of mining silver in Nevada, as well as through his knowledge drawn from his father-in-law's coal mining company. As a young man, Olivia Langdon's father, Jarvis Langdon, had purchased several hundred acres of rich Allegheny County pine tree land that turned out to be even richer in deposits of coal. He created the J. Langdon Coal Company, taking advantage of the industrial shift of the nation in the post-Civil War years, expanding his business into the Nova Scotia region of Canada and creating a railroad system to help move his coal. His company mined coal along the Great Shamokin Path of Pennsylvania, an old Native American trail. Langdon's company, therefore, was located where Twain and Warner placed Sterling in the novel. Furthermore, Langdon's coal empire left ecological stains in the region of Pennsylvania, including asbestos at the site, that have remained well into the 21st century. Through Twain's relationship to Langdon, as well as his experience in Nevada's silver mines, not only did he understand the mechanics of mining silver or coal, but he also witnessed firsthand the scars mining leaves on the land. Twain also used the Langdon Coal Company to help him research the coal portion of the Gilded Age. He wrote to Olivia to ask company leadership, quote, if a stream of water typically flows when a coal vein is discovered. He remembered that happening in silver mining, but he wanted to verify it for coal too. In Sterling's victorious scene, Twain and Warner write, he sought the spot where the coal had lain. He had to look close, for the light was waning. Then to make sure, he put his hand to the ground and a little stream of water swept against his fingers. Thank God I've struck it at last. The little stream of water in the novel is a piece of realism drawn from Twain's experience mining for silver in Nevada and Langdon Coal Company's knowledge of coal in Pennsylvania. Twain also understood the immense wealth mining can bring. Twain visited New York City to attend the coal company's annual meeting, as he was never one to shy away from a chance to display ostentatious displays of wealth. Thomas Registad notes, although he described the experience in humorous terms, Twain was dazzled by the confidential view of naked capitalism. Twain's twinned concerns, desire for wealth, and possible concerns for the negative impacts of mining, add an interesting layer of ambiguity to Sterling's success story. Sterling spends most of the Gilded Age struggling to find a rich vein of coal that would secure his fortune and his ability to marry his beloved Ruth Bolton. Until the end of the novel, this is a long and tiring endeavor. The earth is never willing to yield one product hidden in her bosom without an equivalent for it. And when a person asks of her coal, she is quite apt to require gold in exchange. This section demonstrates the ongoing theme of gold/gilt that runs throughout the novel. Furthermore, it makes an ironic statement of the cost of mining for coal that is therefore worth perhaps even more than its weight in gold. Interestingly, though, it is the earth that is extracting this price from Sterling and others like him. The cost of mining and exploiting the earth of its mineral wealth is some other and comparable and perhaps even more precious true form of wealth. Sterling discovers this almost to his ruin before the end of the novel, as almost at the point of despair, he finally strikes coal and saves himself and the Boltons from financial ruin. He describes his final attempt, in which he would put in a parting blast for luck. By this point, the land is unbroken no longer. The mountainside where the mine is located is now littered with deserted cabins and other domestic wares. Sterling tells himself, "Coal or no coal, I will drive the tunnel clear through the hill. I will not surrender while I am alive." In theory, Sterling is being described admirably in this scene, dedicated and persevering. However, he's also bullheaded in his quest, willing to tunnel entirely through a mountain rather than leave it alone. Though he finds coal at this moment, the image left in the readers' minds is one of desolation and ruin of a mined area. Moreover, there is a hint before Sterling finally strikes coal that he is contemplating abandoning the mine entirely. Twain and Warner are not explicit here, but in Sterling's desolation on that final day, he considers moving on. They write, "Arrived at the mouth of the tunnel, he threw his coat upon the ground, sat down on a stone, and his eye sought the westering sun and dwelt upon the charming landscape which stretched its woody ridges, wave upon wave, to the golden horizon." The West had by this point in the U.S. become synonymous with efforts to mine gold, silver, and other minerals, even as Sterling is doing that work in the East. Twain and Warner allude to this by describing the sunset's golden horizon. Whether Sterling would find success farther west, perhaps in the Mississippi River region with the national banner of its own version of gold, or even farther preceding Huck Finn lighting out for the territories, is finally made unnecessary, as at that moment he discovers coal in the east of Pennsylvania. However, perhaps some of the consequences of the drive to accumulate wealth, even at the cost of the destruction of the beyond human world, can be seen by readers now in this brief reverie of his. When scholars discuss Twain or Warner eco-critically, they tend to analyze them in terms of regional works like Twain's Mississippi River novels, Warner's garden writings, and the travel narratives of both. Indeed, Barbara Ladd finds Twain deserving of our attention as one of the 19th-century American writers most attentive to the interdependence of humankind and the natural world, to the conditions, often difficult, under which we inhabit the natural world, and to its ultimate indifference to our desires, issues that continue to preoccupy eco-critics. Twain, and to some extent Warner, recognizes and appreciates that humans are subjected to natural laws and can be harmed by natural forces. Moreover, Jennifer Wren Atkinson observes that in My Summer in a Garden, Warner establishes the modern gardening narrative, that the work may be seen as the forerunner to Martha Stewart's Empire, the best-selling books of Michael Pollan, the cult-like status of Slow Food, and countless other garden publications, products, and practices comprising today's DIY gardening craze, of which I am definitely a member, by the way. In other words, these are writers who spend a great deal of their career discussing the beyond human world. They pay careful attention to descriptions of speculative land projects in Tennessee or Pennsylvania that focus not on the natural world, but on the commodification of it. In other words, engagement with the beyond human world is a core issue for both authors, and some element of this cannot help but seep into their combined work. In 2023, the Association for the Study of Literature and Environment put out a call for eco-criticism in Southern literature using Twain as an exemplar author. Meanwhile, in his opening to My Summer in a Garden, Warner writes of nature, "The most humiliating thing to me about a garden is the lesson it teaches of the inferiority of man." Accurate. "Nature is prompt, decided, inexhaustible. She thrusts up her plants with a vigor and freedom that I admire. She is at it early and late, and at all night, never tiring nor showing the least sign of exhaustion." Gardening, as a mild and appropriate form of engagement with the beyond human world, is Warner's theme in this earlier work, and readers support him in his efforts. Still, he describes this work as struggle, as work, against weeds, weather, and other disasters that nature can throw at a long-suffering gardener. A chapter epigraph from Following the Equator that is attributed to Twain's character Pudd'nhead Wilson, makes a similar point. Nature makes the locust with an appetite for crops. Man would have him made with an appetite for sand. In other words, the more than human world does not necessarily align with our desires. It remains challenging for us to bring food and other necessities from the earth. In the case of the potential exploiters of the beyond human world in the Gilded Age, our sympathies are less in line with these human actors. In this way, figures like the miner Philip Sterling and even the Hawkins family, with their desire to mine the Tennessee land for some as yet undiscovered mineral wealth, can only ever hope for a temporary success. An ameliorating event must occur to balance the scales, such as Sterling transferring the title of his land, of his mine, to his sponsors, the Boltons, instead of keeping it for himself. Prophetic critiques of greed and humanity's impact on the more than human world are perhaps all the truer and ring all the truer in the 21st century. In this way, Twain and Warner make a statement that is as true as it has ever been about mining and the speculative capitalist economy that favors the very few at the expense of the very many. The Gilded Age was not an unqualified success upon its publication. Greg Camfield notes that the reviews of the novel were decidedly mixed. He quote, "Many newspapers in the 19th century were unabashedly connected to political parties and would therefore express outrage against any book that attacked Washington, Wall Street, and westward expansion as directly and caustically as did the Gilded Age." Even in these critical reviews of the novel, though, issues that continue into the 21st century are foregrounded. Wall Street and Washington remain as controversial and problematic in this century as they were in the time of Twain and Warner. In addition, while westward expansion is usually associated with the 19th century, the concept of globalization, traversing borders for economic gain, remains. Camfield does not specifically note environmental concerns here, but they are connected. Twain and Warner can be seen to include environmental degradation with other issues of unbridled capitalism. Justin Kaplan adds that there were perhaps too many themes in the novel. He provides a long list of topics, including coal mining and land improvement schemes, along with so many others, such as lobbyists and Congress, women's suffrage, and the manipulation of African Americans by carpetbaggers. Coal is as significant as any issue on this list of his. Readers are left with Twain's characteristic ambiguity by the end of the novel. Zhang argues, quote, "Twain's own ambivalence toward the power of money and the fever of speculation has clearly predestined the futility of his efforts. He condemned money, which he believed had usurped the sacred throne of God, but the despised money was his very dream, a dream he pursued all his life." While Twain and to some extent Warner were not the nature writers that we kind of imagine in the way that we imagine Henry David Thoreau or Rachel Carson, as is often stated by critics, there is a sharp satiric sense that comes out in The Gilded Age as the two challenge the innate speculative nature of people who hope to mine the beyond human world for their own gilded benefit. Thank you.